Our first speaker will be Ken Robison. Ken Robison serves as a historian at the Overholser Historical Research Center in Fort Benton and at the Great Falls and Cascade County Historic Preservation Commission. He is also a trustee on the board of the Montana Historical Society. And last August, he received the new Alma Smith Jacobs Award from the Montana Library Association for his work on neglected Black Montana history. He'll be sharing with us today the work and impact of Montana's first African-American librarian in his talk, Alma Smith Jacobs, an Exceptional Civil Rights Leader. So without further ado, please welcome Mr. Ken Robison to the stage.
Well, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me in back? I understand you have to swallow this mic, so. In the summer of 2018, a young airman reported for duty at Malmstrom Air Force Base. Staff Sergeant Mishi Rivera Acosta had serious concerns about this tour of duty. In her words, "I had reservations about my assignment to Malmstrom due to the minimal minority presence. Once settled, I drove around the city to gain a better perspective of the community. Initially, nothing piqued my interest. I parked my vehicle adjacent to 301 2nd Avenue North and began to lament, tears streaming down my face as I questioned God as to why I was relocated to this area, an area that felt so foreign to me. I lifted my head and gazed upon the mural of Alma Smith Jacobs. Her image took me out of my immediate defeatism and then renewed my spirit. My mother, as mothers tend to do, was of course concerned about my new assignment. She visited shortly after, and at top of my list of priorities was to take her by the library. And once she saw that mural, she said, "You need to create a new home with new roots in this community. Miss Smith Jacobs truly inspires me." I dedicated personal time to researching and discovering more about Alma Smith Jacobs. Inspired by Alma Jacobs, Sergeant Mishi became a treasured member of the Great Falls community, leading the Malmstrom Diversity Council in a whole series of activities that made our community a better place. From installing a mural at the ballpark honoring a dynamic 1950s Great Falls Dodgers rookie Black baseball player, to a plaque honoring the first Chinese American woman in the Air Service Pilot Corps who died landing her Lend-Lease aircraft at Great Falls Army Air Base during World War II. Sergeant Mishi was also a key spark in the first Juneteenth celebration in Great Falls, an annual tradition that's continued now. So just who is Alma Smith Jacobs? A woman whose portrait on the side of the Great Falls Public Library could inspire the young in this way. Perhaps no high school yearbook better captured the essence of a graduating senior than the 1934 Great Falls High School Roundup, when the senior photo of Alma Jacobs, or Alma Smith at that point, described her as gentle, good, and virtuous. Perhaps no graduate of Great Falls High School has had a greater positive impact on their community than Alma. And that was just the beginning. Alma began breaking down racial barriers in her hometown, her state, her region, and even nationally, despite the many obstacles in her way. This was indeed an exceptional young woman. Alma grew up at a time in Great Falls when discrimination racially against Blacks and Native Americans made you think of Jim Crow. And they, of course, Great Falls totally excluded Chinese, as you probably have seen in the latest issue of Montana's Magazine of Western History. Born in Lewistown in 1916, she moved with her family to Great Falls at age 6. Alma's mother, Emma Riley Smith, had 3 priorities for her children: education, education, education. This lifelong motivating force, no doubt, came from her own lack of formal education. Emma was born in Forest City, Arkansas, the child of former slaves. She was 14 when her family moved to Liberia, part of a Back to Africa movement of the 1890s. During her years there, she attended a mission school. After the death of her parents, Emma returned to America to put her younger sister in school at Wilberforce, Ohio. Emma made her way to Butte, Montana, and there she married railroad worker Martin Luther Smith. A measure of Emma's own ability and positive influence on her children and her community is the fact that she was nominated for Mother of the Year in Montana in 1967. The Smiths and other Great Falls Black residents lived on the lower South Side, a dense and ethnically mixed working class neighborhood. Black residents worked for the Great Northern or Milwaukee Railroads or at the rail repair yards or the downtown service industries. They lived in black hotels, railroad porters' quarters, and modest family homes, and they worshiped in black churches. Unofficial, though pervasive, discrimination placed many constraints on African Americans. Blacks were barred from restaurants and nightclubs, except those few operated by Blacks on the lower South Side, except like Leo Lamar's Ozark Club, where everyone was welcome. And they could not join labor unions, thus they were shut out of the highest paying jobs. The original social hub of the Black community was the Union Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church. Organized by the first Black residents of Great Falls from 1891, when the AME Church first opened its dours. Through good times and bad, the church served as the cultural, social, political, and religious heart of the Black community. The women of Union Bethel were the church's soul through their loyalty, hard work, and dedication. Emma Smith was among the staunchest of members, teaching Sunday school for decades. Both Emma and Alma became active leaders in the Dunbar Art and Study Club, the Great Falls chapter of the remarkable Montana Colored Women's Clubs, formed about 1920 when Black women were not welcome to join the Montana Federation of Women's Clubs. Alma became a librarian almost by accident, even though she'd always been an avid reader and library patron throughout her childhood. As she neared the end of her high school years, she knew her family couldn't afford to send her to college. Yet she'd been an outstanding student, active in many student groups like the Forum, a debating club, as well as in the school library. Yet she'd gained the attention of the principal of the high school, Merle Gallagher, a graduate of the University of Montana. Gallagher's brother, Buell, by chance, had just become the president of Talladega College, a small Black congregational church school in Alabama. He was recruiting students nationally and was able to put together a scholarship and work program so Alma could attend the college through Principal Merle's strong recommendation. Alma went off to Talladega to major in sociology, and in 1938, she completed a Bachelor of Arts in sociology with honors. The honors earned her a scholarship from the General Education Board of the Rockefeller Foundation for professional training in Columbia University's School of Library Science. Following graduation from Talladega, she became assistant librarian at the Talladega College, where she helped recatalog the library and was in charge of the bookmobile for the traveling library service around the county. Over the next several years, Alma worked during the school year at Talladega, and then in the summer took courses at Columbia, where she received a degree in library science from that school. Along the way, Alma married Marcus Jacobs, a World War II Army veteran. Returning to Great Falls in 1946, Alma broke racial barriers when she was hired as catalog librarian at the Great Falls Public Library, likely the first Black in Great Falls to be hired to a professional job. Great Falls was not quite the same place as it had been when Alma left in 1934. With the wartime economic boom and Black airmen assigned to the new Great Falls Air Base, the Black population had more than doubled. Black civic organizations like the NAACP and particularly the Dunbar Club were fighting for civil rights in Montana. In 1945, the Dunbar Club members wrote letters supporting civil rights legislation to President Truman as well as to the Montana delegation to Congress. They joined the mayor unions and NAACP in opposing discrimination of a young Black figure skater by Southern-born instructor of the Great Falls Figure Skating Club. And in 1948, they successfully protested a local theater's refusal to sell tickets to Blacks. In 1950, after the integration of the United States Armed Forces, the Dunbar Club, led by Alma, served on an interracial committee working to open access to local establishments for Black airmen at the base. As catalog librarian and armed by her advanced library degree, she became highly valued as a member of the library staff and in the community. 8 years later, on January 1st, 1954, the library board cautiously named Alma acting chief librarian, withholding permanent designation to gauge library staff and community reaction. The reaction of the staff and the community was so overwhelmingly positive that 6 months later, Alma was made the chief librarian. The fact that she was Black did not seem pertinent to her job or her life. Alma said, "I don't consider myself the Negro authority in Great Falls or anyplace else. I resent being thought of as a Negro librarian. I'd rather concentrate on being a good librarian." And so Alma thought, and so she lived. Yet the Jim Crow eras persisted. One day, shortly after Alma became the chief librarian, her friend Arlene Reichert invited her to lunch at Shell's townhouse in downtown Great Falls. Alma responded with resignation. "I'd love to join you, but I don't think they'll let me in." And certainly the Shell and the other restaurants downtown would not. And this remained a typical scene and problem throughout Montana. By 1960, the Black community in Great Falls had grown significantly, with more than 500 residents and young Blacks stationed at Malmstrom. Slowly and accelerated by the 1964 Civil Rights Act, and then by the 1972 Montana Constitution, housing began to open throughout the city. Unions finally began to open membership. Churches increasingly welcomed Black members. No longer were Blacks turned away from restaurants and nightclubs. Great Falls also began to acknowledge and celebrate Black role models like Charlie Pride. After his move from Helena, he spent a couple of years in Great Falls just as he was achieving superstardom on Western music. Alma was, the minor league baseball team had future stars like Johnny Roseboro and Eddie Reed. Alma was named Great Falls Woman of the Year in 1957 in Great Falls. Emma Smith was honored a decade later as Great Falls Mother of the Year. In 1974, Geraldine Travis was elected to the Montana legislature, the first Black legislature. For the next 2 decades, Alma provided outstanding leadership for the library in the Great Falls community. She believed that as a library, she was part of the world of exploding knowledge. She was ahead of her time in anticipating the information revolution of today, saying, I consider the library the information center of the community. She believes self-education is the key to living a world of daily advances. She truly believed one of her favorite sayings, the public library is the poor man's university. Librarian Alma set 2 goals and achieved them both. The first goal of bookmobile service to the rural communities throughout Cascade County. She initiated in 1956. In addition, she became a driving force in the development of rural library services program that in Great Falls' instance extended to 4 surrounding counties. And in her second and larger goal, Alma dreamed of a new modern library for Great Falls, now at that time, Montana's largest city, to replace the overcrowded and inadequate Carnegie Library. Throughout her leadership and perseverance and the help of many in the community, she saw this dream come true. In 1959, she began a campaign for a new library building. Following bond issue failures in 1959 and 1961, she redoubled her efforts, talking endlessly to civic groups and working tirelessly to sway public opinion. Finally, a bond issue for the new library building was narrowly passed in 1965. For Alma, it was a dream come true. Her hard work prevailed. She simply never gave up. The new library opened November 12th, 1967. We call it the house that Alma built. During these years, Alma was becoming highly respected throughout her profession. She was named Librarian of the Year in 1968 by the Montana Library Association and broke racial barriers, serving as president of that association, and then as president of the Northwest Library Association. National recognition came and led to her appointment to the executive board of the National Library Association, becoming the first Montanan and person of color to do so. Alma's reputation extended to her contributions in education. In recognition, she was invited into Delta Kappa Gamma Society, the International Honor Organization of Women Educators. In 1971, the Montana Education Association, on behalf of classroom teachers, honored Alma with its prestigious Golden Apple Award for her unusual perception and awareness of community. And of course, she keenly was perceptive and aware of the Great Falls community. She was a leader in Union Bethel and the Dunbar Society. She was a leader in breaking down racial barriers for both Great Falls and Malmstrom Air Force Base. She, in her quiet, unassuming way, had led the charge for racial equality in Great Falls and Montana. In the words of her longtime friend, Dorothy Bond, quote, "There's nobody in Great Falls more responsible than Alma is for the integration of this city," unquote. Bond and Jacobs spoke on the radio together to raise awareness of civil rights issues, and Alma served on and led human rights organizations, including the Montana Federation of Women's Clubs, Colored Women's Clubs, and the Montana Advisory Committee to the U.S. Civil Rights Commission. Great Falls architect William J. Hess wrote in 1970, Alma Jacobs' greatest contribution to Great Falls and Montana has been in the racial problem and civil rights. Her position as Great Falls Public Librarian, along with her state and national library associations, has given both her and her race added stature. Her personality is such that even after a 1-minute meeting, you're no longer aware of the race difference. A shining role model was emerging in the community. Alma capped her professional career serving as Montana State Librarian from 1973 to 1981. During that time, she consolidated the many parts of the state library that have been farmed out around Helena, and she led the planning for what today is the current state library. She was honored with doctorate degrees by Mount Holyoke College and Montana State College, Bozeman. Gentle, good, and virtuous, Alma Jacobs rests today in Highland Cemetery with her parents. Yet her legacy stands strong in the Great Falls community through the barrier she helped demolish and the library that she helped build. As you approach that Great Falls Public Library, you of course see her mural, and then you walk through Alma Plaza, Alma Jacobs Memorial Plaza. In recent years, Alma was named an outstanding Montanan in the Capitol Gallery of Outstanding Montanans. For the past 13 years, the Alma Jacobs Foundation has co-hosted with the library a Black Heritage Evening highlighting Alma's contributions and bringing together an interracial crowd, filling the Cordingley Room for song, dance, history, and a sampling of soul food. During these special evenings, speakers like Mayor Wilmot Collins of Helena and Malmstrom Air Force Base's 341st Missile Wing Commander Anthony Cotton, whose grandparents had been sharecroppers in the South, had powerful messages for the many youth in the audience. Today, 13 years later, then Colonel Tony Cotton is a 4-star general in the United States Air Force. Last year, the Montana Library Association initiated an annual Alma Smith Jacobs Diversity, Equity, and Integrity, or an Inclusion Award. And this year, Maria Unruh, teacher librarian at Broadwater Elementary School in Helena, received this award. Alma Smith Jacobs, gentle, good, and virtuous, led the Great Falls Library and the Montana State Library into new eras, and she mightily helped lead her community, state, region, and nation into a new era of civil rights. Thank you very much.